Welcome to another edition of NetStruc Talks. It's your host, Sharon Lee, publicity strategist. And NetStruc Talks is an information show that provides valuable content for consumers and entrepreneurs on a personal and professional growth. My motto is tell us something that we don't know that will help us be a better person and business owner. In each show, I have an amazing guest that not only wowed me, but has accomplished so much in their career. And today's guest is all about equity and inclusion in the workplace. Stay tuned. Welcome again. And I have a special guest here with me today, Sacha Thompson, who is all about equity and inclusion. Hey, Sacha, how are you?
I'm good, Sharon. How are you?
I'm doing good. I think the last time we saw each other was at Dr. Avis's event a couple of months ago.
It was a whole lot warmer than it is now. Yes.
Tell me about it. And this is long overdue because we were supposed to do this since months ago. I know you have a lot that was happening then that I know has materialized with your business and with all the great work that you're doing in the equity and inclusion space. But before we jump into that, I want our listeners to know who really is Sacha. Equity and inclusion is not something that everybody gets. And, it has to be like a really special person to really understand and really make an impact in a workplace about equity and inclusion. So one, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, but two, why this? Why equity and inclusion?
Yeah, you know what? So Sharon, first of all, thank you so much for having me. Like you said, this is long overdue. I love that question because for me, it's one and the same, right? Like I don't see me separate from the work. I am Caribbean American. I was born in Barbados, and so came to this country as a toddler. And so was really raised in American culture, but knew that what I was experiencing at home or with my family was very different than what my friends were experiencing. Right. So knowing that at an early age, I constantly joke and say, a lot of my friends growing up would ask me what my dad was saying. My dad had a very strong Bayesian accent. And I'm like, he's speaking in English. Like, I don't understand why you don't understand.
I know.
And so for me, it's been something that's just been a part of who I am from day one. Right. And understanding how do you try to navigate those places and spaces. I got into this work really because I wanted to understand more about people. I was always the one that had the friend that was different. I was always the one that was different or the only. And so really trying to understand and did my undergraduate work in sociology, right? So I was learning about different cultures and how they interacted with each other amongst themselves and across the United States. Ended up working in the Office of Multicultural Affairs as an undergraduate and really got exposed to just the diversity and beauty that we are as a people. And so just really always had that as a part of my job in some way, shape, or form. If it was serving underrepresented students in middle schools or creating tutoring programs for underrepresented students, or even underserved students and populations. It was something that I've always done. So fast forward to the summer of 2020, that was just so pivotal for everyone. Actually, I'll go back before that. Probably around 2018, 2019, I started really thinking of, okay, you know what? I've been doing this work in organizations, not necessarily getting where I wanted to go or getting pushed back in places that I'm like, I know what I'm talking about makes sense, but I was dealing with a lot of people that had titles, but no background or no experience in these spaces, or didn't come from marginalized communities. And so just getting a lot of pushback and rub. And so in 2020, that summer of 2020 happened, you know, what was interesting was, on one hand, I was being vilified within the organization as like the worst person that ever worked there. I was the reason why Black people weren't coming to apply to this particular organization. And then all of a sudden it was like, Sacha, tell us what we need to do. How do we support Black Lives Matter? And I'm like, you know what? Yeah, it's time for me to go. So
to have to ask the question, in this day and age, right.
Yeah. So, you know, launched with the idea that I wanted to start my business in November of that year, just give myself some time to get my foundation. I left my job September 1st. I had my first client September 15th, and I've been going ever since. And, you know, and that's a unique, I don't want to say it's a unique story. It's a story in terms of so many people go through it. And they just don't know how to navigate around that. Some people just stay complacent and just take it in, which isn't good. And then others do what you did, you know, learn about how is it that you can actually help change this culture. And then, you know, put it forward. So kudos to you in doing that. But as I want to add to that too. Part of that too was, even when I was in that horrible situation, my mindset was, how do I use this to help me get to my next? Right. So my coaching certifications, they paid for. Right. So I really wanted to make the best out of a bad situation. So I really utilized those months to set up the foundation for the business.
And that's very good to, you know, because again, you know, people get upset and they just be like, you know what? I'm gone. I'm out. And you know, I'm out. And now you are, you know, paycheckless. And
without a plan.
You don't have the plan. And, you know, the strategy, it's so key when you're setting up your business, especially something as sensitive as what you're in. You know, you got to have the right tools. So you decided to utilize a bad situation and make a good situation out of it by getting your credentials. Because again, you know, when as what you said, a lot of people think that they are, you know, diversity and inclusion experts. But what really makes you as an expert? And you went and you did the work, you did the educational work, you got the certifications to show that, hey, listen, I am the expert. Not only have I lived it, experienced it, but I got the credentials to show it. And a lot of people don't do that.
You know, and I think there's a misnomer that in order to do this work, you have to be certified in diversity, equity, and inclusion. There is some educational components to this, and this is always a learning journey in this work because it's ever changing. Right. But I'm like, what skills do you bring? So I came with a marketing background, so I understand audiences and I understand messaging, right? I came in with that sociology background, so I understand how cultures operate and connect with each other, and understand also how we identify with our cultures in very different ways, right? So, and I came in with an MBA already, right, in business, in management, and marketing. So I understand how workplaces operate. So in addition to having this understanding of diversity, equity, and inclusion, I came in with some business skills. And I think that a lot of people come into this work thinking, oh, the passion for diversity, equity, and inclusion is going to be enough. At the end of the day, you need to have a skill set that's foundational to how you do this work.
And it's crazy you say that, because I was going to ask, you know, what makes you unique? What makes you different from other organizations or other businesses that does diversity and inclusion work? And you just said it, you know, you came with a skill set that actually, you know, for businesses, they need that because they're probably lacking on because obviously it's a rebranding also. It's a rebranding. The messaging is now different. The culture is now different. So all of that, what you have, that skill set that you're bringing, you're applying it to the change and the culture sensitivity change of what you're doing with the diversity and inclusion. You know, what type of clients do you attract? Like, you know, is it large corporations? Is it small businesses with limited numbers? Like what type of clients?
Yes. I'll answer it that way.
You're like, yes, all the
Yeah,
above.
it's so funny because I've had some clients that I'm like, how in the world did you even find me? Right? Because it's just been a blend, right? So my first career was in higher education, right? So I'm very, very connected to the higher education space. So I do a lot of work there. I've worked with cancer centers. I've worked with record labels, right? I've worked with several record labels at this point. I've worked with family-owned businesses that are pretty large, 1,500 employees. I've worked with very small teams that are just trying to figure out how do we fix the culture within our team. So it really ranges. And it's funny because every time someone asks me this question, I'm like, there's really no industry that I'm specific to because this work isn't industry specific, right? How do you create an inclusive culture is one that every organization, every industry has to figure out. And the unique spin that I bring to that is focusing on psychological safety, right? So where everyone feels valued, seen, heard, and connected, and being able to provide data by demographics so you can actually see this is what women are experiencing versus the men. This is what the racial groups are experiencing. This is what right now, the biggest one has been age, right? Like this is what each generation is experiencing in the workplace. Yeah. These are the expectations. The locations, are you doing remote versus in-person versus hybrid? All of those things. So we look at that data by those demographics. And so without me having to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, I'm actually looking at the outcomes of what this work is through the work that I do with my clients.
Oh, that's great. That, again, it's so important, but it's so sad that we actually, I mean, good for you because, you stay in business, but it's sad at the fact that, we have to have this type of training and coaching in the workplace. And, people look at this and, sometimes they're totally oblivious to it. Yeah. They're oblivious to, not understanding what diversity is, not understanding inclusion, equity. Like they don't understand that. In your line of work, and I know you say you deal with everybody, which industry has like the worst that you've seen? Because, when you think about it, right? A lot of things are going on in workplace and healthcare. So healthcare equity, during the pandemic, we saw that how the healthcare system literally crumbled in front of our face, where you saw the resources, where they were going and who was lacking. Yeah. And, so that's like, when I say that, when you come across this, which is the biggest one that you see that really, really still needs a whole lot of work?
Education.
Wow.
And I say that broadly in that the irony in this is so many people are educated in these things and they're academics in these spaces, but these academics are dealing with the very issues that they're talking about, right? Like look at what's happening in higher education right now and this attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And much of it is a lot of, especially the Black women that are being attacked in this space. Like this is the stuff that I'm talking about, right? These are the things that we're trying to negate, but I'm dealing with it every single day. And so, and that was my experience even when I was in tech, right? I can be on stage and talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but if I'm being excluded from meetings by leaders that are also advocates for diversity, equity, and inclusion, then they're just mouthpieces, right? They're not embodying the work. And so I would say education is probably one of the biggest areas. Politics is another one where folks are just saying what they need to in order to get your vote, right? And so, but are they embodying the work? And I think that's the piece that's missing. People know the language, they know the words, but what are they doing every single day to actually embody what the outcomes of this work should be? And that's the piece that I think is missing actually across all industries.
So when you go into an organization or to a workplace, leadership is important, as you mentioned, when if you're not called to the table to help, to talk about, to have this discussion, how important is it for the leadership to really understand that this has to be, you have to implement this? And have you had any pushbacks?
So it's a yes and no question. So I have been blessed. I mean, knock on wood. I have been blessed that most of the organizations that come to me aren't just starting in this journey, right?
Okay.
This is like phase 2 by the time they come to me. So they've done a lot of the basic works and they have leadership buy-in. So I haven't had a lot of that pushback from leadership. The challenge becomes, the challenge then becomes, okay, how do we embody this? How do we make this part of the organization's DNA? And it's not just the responsibility of just this one office that has limited resources, right? And so the conversation then becomes, as someone that's the accountant on the team, right, the CFO, how does this impact me, right? So then that's a different conversation that I'm having with the CFO. And it's not just impacting the people on your team, right? But how are you looking at inequities? Who are you all funding versus not funding when you're looking at the outreach that you all are doing in the community? Are you even thinking about it in this way, or are you just operating kind of like robots? And this is what we've always done. Just because you've always done it doesn't mean that's the most equitable way to do it. And so it's really having leaders, challenging them to think about how they do their work in a more equitable way beyond just the HR stuff, right? Beyond the recruitment and talent retention. It is, how does this work look more equitable as we're moving forward so that it can impact the industry? That's a more difficult conversation to have. But I am noticing, excuse me, I am noticing more leaders are at least opening their eyes, have been opened to that possibility.
And you know, when you talk about that, when you speak with the leaders and you have them, obviously they're already, like what you said, most of them have been in phase 2 already. And so now it's, let's have this discussion with my team. Like, you know, the CFO or the CEO is like, okay, we get it. We understand. Now we're going down to everybody else. How do you deal with the team, the staff, that if they're not ready? I'm pretty sure you came across that. So leadership is like, yes, we need it. Obviously, it's a business, but now it's dealing with the staff. It's dealing with the people that the day-to-day working. Like, how is that impacting the overall work that what you're doing?
That's actually been the focus of the business for the last year and a half. It's really those middle managers. It's the people in the middle, the people leaders, and helping them build the skills and competencies. And it's not just, oh, you're going to this DEI workshop and checking a box. It is, okay, how does this impact how you show up as an inclusive leader? And so a lot, again, the psychological safety work, when we do that, each leader gets their own scores, like they get their own report. So I'm like, this is the data based on your team. Like, this is what they're saying. And then we can have a conversation about how you can show up as a more inclusive leader. So we do a lot of one-on-one coaching at that level, where many of them don't talk about leadership in the workplace. They're just kind of repeating what other leaders have done and seen, you know, what they've seen before. And it's, how do you define, like, how are you defining your leadership skills and competencies? Like, who are you as a leader? And spending time there with them. So a good portion of our work is really focused on those middle managers. Another area that we're actually focusing on this year is first-time managers. Especially if they're early career folks or younger generations. This is the first time they're leading people. Again, who are you as a leader? How do you want, what legacy do you want to leave as a leader? Having them think about that early and really start to build and shape those competencies now so that they can continue to learn and thrive, right, as they're moving up within the organization. But that's where the meat of our work is turning right now. It's really those people leaders and early career or first time managers.
So it's really the reshaping, the coaching, the training, the soft skills, the educating, the soft skills part about this. And have you had anyone that has literally just like, this is not working? Like,
not necessarily not working. It's so funny. So two people immediately come to mind. I had one person, I was brought in, this particular team member, this particular leader's psychological safety scores were very low. Like, the score ranged between like 100 and negative 100, and they were well into the negative 100.
Oh my
I mean, the
gosh.
negative numbers. And after talking to him for a while, I realized first time really leading a team at this size, he led 1 or 2 people, but having 12 people was very different. So there was like this intimidation that was kind of happening. There was this lack of ownership because it was like the decisions were all like, well, we decided, right? The leadership team decided. And I'm like, well, what were your decisions? Like, what part of this did you decide? So it's a lot of one-on-one coaching. And after doing that work with him, we redid the psychological safety scores and they were well into the positives, right?
Wow.
So,
okay. So it's the work.
Changing the work.
Perception. Yeah.
It's mindset shifts, right?
Yeah.
I also had a leader on that same team who's been a leader for 30 years, right? So he was just like, his scores were great. That conversation that I had with him was different. It was, how can you be a mentor to the others that are on the team that this is the first time that they're leading? And he was like, I never thought about that. Like, he was like, I don't check in with them. I just kind of stay in my lane. And I'm like, how much can you teach them? Like, how much knowledge that do you have about the organization and how things operate that you can share that can help them be successful? By the time we redid that, right, he was just like, oh my gosh, I have monthly check-ins with different folks. I'm getting out of my little cube and actually talking to people and now being seen as more of a leader than I was because I was in my little hole. Right. And so it's a different mindset shift. It's less of the individual and more community based. Like, how can I connect with this community? And that's where I really see this work going.
Right. Now, you talk about community, you talk about how, when you come into this and you changing the mindset shift and things like that. Is there a point where you just have to be like, we have to dismantle this whole program and restart back up again? Because I know, sometimes you might come into, I know you said that, they're probably in a phase 2 already, maybe phase 1 was not done properly. Like, have you had to do that? And why is that important to dismantle a current one and go into a new one?
Yeah. So I've had one team where after we did the work, the larger organization decided to dismantle that team because it was so toxic. There was no direction. The leaders had basically checked out. And so it just did not make sense. But where they are now is a much healthier space for them. So I think that really worked. The other thing, I've had another organization where it wasn't necessarily a dismantling as much as it was the leader realizing that she was kind of micromanaging the leaders on her team. And so it was, how do I remove myself from this so that I can empower others? And so there was a shift there where they really decided, okay, rather than this leadership team being the 3 of us, it's these 2 folks. And they just helped me understand what's going on day to day so I can focus on other things. And so that work actually took about a year to do. But we realized also, there were communication issues that were happening across. There was misunderstandings that were happening across. And so we actually left that with new communication plans and how they communicated internally, how they shared information as a team and as a group. And so moving forward, they were now able to actually function in a way where it wasn't just this, what's the word? Almost like the positive negativity kind of thing where it's like, oh, you're just nice to be nice, but then you're saying really other things. Yeah. So
you're just, going back and forth and not being positive.
Right. So that totally changed the culture of that team moving forward. So we've had that where they're doing the work and they're like, you know what, how this current structure is not sustainable. How do we reshape this and rethink this? And with that particular group, everyone at all levels of the organization were part of that decision making. And so now they all felt empowered to be able to use their voice and create change.
I mean, at the end of the day, the goal is for you to be in a positive workplace. And being in a toxic workplace on any level is not conducive for anyone, mentally, physically, emotionally, and, understanding the concept of diversity and inclusion and diversity, in the workplace is key. And for you to educate not only the leaders, but you're also educating the managers. Every level I see from what you're talking about, every level gets some form of training and education, which I think is key, because I think what falls short, and you correct me if I'm wrong, the leadership wants it, they do it, they get the training, but they forget everybody else. And
it's either that or it's grassroots and the staff is asking for stuff and leadership isn't doing anything, right? So I see it both ways. I absolutely see it both ways.
Both ways. How do you see the future of diversity, inclusion, and equity?
Oh, goodness.
What's the future going? Do you see it getting bigger and bigger? What's the future, at least for you?
Yeah, so with the current attacks that are happening on diversity, equity, and inclusion, I don't think that it'll be named or called diversity, equity, and inclusion. It'll evolve into something else. What I want people to realize and understand is this work has been around for decades, right? When you think of the civil rights movement, when you think of affirmative action, all of that was DEI work. We just now put a new label on it, a new package. The work will continue to happen, but I think it'll be named different things moving forward. It will evolve. I actually stopped using a lot of DEI terms and terminology in the last year, not because I'm not doing this work, but I'm like, I don't want that to hinder the work that's being done. So let's focus on the outcomes of this work versus me talking about labels, right? So if I tell you, oh, I want you to go to this DEI leadership, this DEI workshop as a leader, I've been through those. But if I say to you, I want you to focus on being a more inclusive leader so that everyone on your team feels connected to you, right? And connected to each other. Everyone wants to be an inclusive leader, right? Everyone wants that. So I can get the same content, same work in that different, and just package it in a different way. And I think that that's where the future of this work is really going. It's not going to be called DEI, but it's going to be part of the organization's DNA. It's going to be infused into how everyone shows up. And I really think the key to that is that middle management, people manager level.
Right. How can folks get in contact with you?
Yeah. So the best way is to find me on LinkedIn. Just my name. It's the easiest one to come up. It'll be Sacha Thompson, ACC, when it comes up. So you'll know that's me. You can go to my website, www.theequityequationllc.com. Or I actually have another business that is the Equity Leadership Institute. And you can find me there as well, too. And that one actually provides coaching certifications in leadership for people leaders, right? So
really?
Yeah. So one of the things that research is showing right now is that employees want their managers to be mentors and coaches. They're great at being mentors, but they don't know how to coach. And so we provide that level 1 ICF level 1 coaching certification so that they get the basics of coaching.
That is interesting. I mean, I think that's something that a lot of businesses or a lot of leaders needs to have. I mean, is that like a first phase of, going into this work?
Absolutely. Not necessarily going into DEI work, but I think it's the first phase in really understanding how you as a leader can show up better for your team, right? And asking the right questions. Absolutely. Asking the right questions. So many leaders right now want to solve, right? And when they don't know the answers, it's all of this, I'll give it.
Yeah.
You lose trust that way.
Yeah.
With this way, with coaching, you ask the right questions, right? So how can I best support you right now, right? What are the 3 things that are getting in your way? What are 3 things that you could do in the next, 3 weeks that I can help you on?
Okay.
Those are very different questions.
How long is the certification?
So it is a 12-week program. It's all online. It's virtual. Our next cohort it starts in March.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. We'll make sure that we put that in the comment box, the body of the for the interview. So folks, if they're interested, can they find it on this particular website or just hit you up on LinkedIn if
Hit
they're
me up on
interested?
LinkedIn. Yep, they can hit me up on LinkedIn or go to the other website, the equityleadershipinstitute.com.
Okay. Okay.
And the information is there if you go under certifications.
I'll make sure I have all that information. One last thing. What do you want to leave with our guests?
Ooh. I want you to be champions of this work, right? You don't have to be a DEI practitioner or someone that's an expert in this space to be a DEI champion. And so that means just how are you showing up, being intentional about inclusion inside work, but also at home, right? And so that's how you practice this. It's not just something that happens in the workplace. It is something that you embody and live at home as well too. And just being mindful of that.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sacha. I really appreciate you taking the time to educate us about the work and what you're doing and also about this certification for other leaders. So I hope a lot of people, you take advantage of this cohort that's coming up in March. And, you know, make sure that you connect with Sacha on her LinkedIn and also go to her website. And I will see you at the next NetStruc Talks. Take care.